Hello all, welcome to the Reconnaissance for Red Blue Teams course on Pentester Academy. Now let's begin with Memcache servers and look at how we can do reconnaissance on them. So this is going to be a series of videos just on Memcache servers, and in this video we'll understand the basics and how to interact with Memcache servers. Okay, so for the uninitialized, what is Memcache to begin with? Now I'm just going to pretty much read out of their page. It's basically a high performance distributed memory object caching system, generic in nature but originally intended for use in speeding up dynamic web applications by alleviating database load. So if some of that, all of that, or none of that made any sense, then let's try and understand this in a much more simpler way. So Memcache servers are nothing but temporary memory caches. So what happened is, when the World Wide Web exploded and we had Web 2.0 and whatnot, many of these applications required to cache a ton of data which they wanted access to very, very fast in order to serve the clients properly. Now to do this, people went ahead and created Memcache servers. So the whole idea is that the application stores frequently accessed but generally not so changing data into these memory caches. And these are actually stored as key value pairs. So it's a very, very simple way of storing it. And that's really all there is to it. You can't run any queries or anything like that. Do not confuse these for NoSQL databases, right? So you aren't going to be able to run any queries. All you can literally do is basically set a key and a value, push it into the Memcache server. You can set an expiry time. You can say that, hey, you know what, automatically expire this value after 300 seconds, or maybe never till the time, the application itself doesn't change it. So there is an expiry option. But apart from that, all this is really get and set. There are some other options like you can increment and decrement values, etc. But once again, very, very simple operations. That's about it. So in the World Wide Web, you'll actually find very big scalable websites that you may end up pen testing use Memcache servers. And this is really where it is important to understand how these servers work. Now, if you've kind of stayed in touch with what is happening on the pen testing side, you would have read that Memcache servers are, found to be very insecure. They are open and all of that stuff. And we will look into it in the next series of videos. Okay. So why don't we begin, right? So let's actually go to attackdefense.com. So make sure that you're first logged into your Pentester Academy area. And then from there you go on try our online labs. The reason I always tell you to do this in the videos is because when you click this, Pentester Academy pretty much hands you over to Attack Defense, telling the website that you're a Pentester Academy subscriber, right? This basically gives you a lot more rights on this website, including getting you, better servers and whatnot. So always remember to do this. So let's actually go to the dashboard here. Click on Network Recon. Now keep in mind, we are adding new labs literally on a weekly, monthly basis. So there is going to be a change in this menu, but you should be able to find Network Recon. And under that, you should be able to find Memcached. This shouldn't change. Click on that. You should see these two labs. Let's click on Memcached Recon Basics. Okay. So over here, we have a bunch of questions, and this is something we will attack later. In this video, all I'm going to do is start the lab and manually interact with the Memcache server. So we aren't going to be answering these questions and all of that. This comes much, much later. Okay. So let's wait for the labs to begin. Should take around 20-25 seconds. I apologize, I'm traveling right now, so I am in a noisy neighborhood, so you may hear sounds of cars and whatnot off and on a bit. So there you go. So the lab starts. Let's click on the lab link. Now it's very important that you read the instructions on how the lab is set up here. So if you notice, this lab is dedicated to you, which is fantastic. And we are given a terminal to a Kali instance. So this becomes the attacker machine. So this is the attacker machine Kali instance terminal. And after that, the target machine, so the Kali machine has an IP address in the 192 range, which you can find out by doing IPADDR or ifconfig, either way. So let me make the font size just a little bit bigger. And here is the 192.x.y.z range, right? So what it says is the target machine should be located at the IP address 192.xy.3. So if you notice, this ends with a .2. The next machine is actually the Memcache server. Okay, so all we have to do is copy this prefix part out. Now I'm going to do an Nmap. Let's do a service fingerprinting. Don't need DNS. Let's actually do all ports and then give the IP address 192.215.131.3. Now, very important, apart from the 192 prefix and the last .3, these two numbers are going to be different for you, right? So make sure that you find this out and use the appropriate IP address. This is for people new to the attack defense lab. Okay, so let's run this Nmap scan. Shouldn't take too much. Let's see what we find. Okay, so we see that port number 11211, which is basically on TCP, is in open state and is running the Memcache server. And the Memcache server version seems to be 156. Uptime is around 140 seconds, right? Which roughly would be the time since we started the lab. Fantastic. So now, let's actually go ahead and fingerprint this a bit further. Now in Nmap, we know that we have scripts which we can run against targets. So if we actually go to the list of Nmap scripts available, we should be able to scroll down or search and quickly find what we have available for Memcache. So if you notice, there seems to be only one script in here for Memcache called memcached-info.nsc. Okay, so what this does is it retrieves information including system architecture, process ID, etc. Now, the important thing to note is Memcache servers can either be open or can be protected over SASL. Now, the important thing here is we're going to be looking at both of these separately, right? So in the first couple of videos, we're going to look at open Memcache servers, which as a pen tester, you might be able to access if you pivot through certain machines, or at times, you know, if those have been misconfigured to be available externally, which, trust me, it happens quite a lot, more than you would actually think it does. And the second, of course, is it is available and, you know, it is protected, where we can run things like dictionary attacks, etc., and try and break into the machine. The third, of course, is it's all well protected and we use application logic vulnerabilities to poison the cache. But that is something we will look at when we see about Memcache server exploitation in a separate course. Okay, so now let me actually run the Nmap script. So this time around, I'm going to go ahead and give the port number, just more sensible to do that, and say that I would like to use the script memcached-info and then paste in the IP address of the Memcache server. So let's run Nmap now. Very nice. So the most important thing is it says authentication is no, and that's the reason why it's actually able to pull the rest of this information. Okay, this is important. And later on, when we actually see that authentication is there, you will see the difference. So we get some information, the process ID of the Memcache server, the uptime, the current server time, the architecture, couple of other things. Now, important part is that Memcache servers can actually serve both over TCP as well as UDP. In this case, this is running pretty much on TCP, right? UDP generally people don't use because Memcache servers typically are all internal. So, you know, people prefer TCP from what I've seen. And of course, authentication, as I mentioned, is set to no. Okay. Now, let's interact with this Memcache server manually. Now, why manually is that's the best way to learn how to play with this server. Now, the good news is Memcached supports both a text and a binary based protocol, and we can go ahead and talk to it pretty much in text, just like you do for protocols like SMTP and POP3 and whatnot. So I'm just going to use telnet, give it the IP address, give it the port number. Let's actually clear the screen with a Control L and then connect to it. There you go. If you notice, if I hit a bunch of enters, nothing happens, right? Error. Let me put in a help, nothing. Let me put in a question mark, nothing, right? So to understand how to work with this, we will need to look at the protocol documentation. Now, this can be a bit painful. So I'm just going to go to some of the more common commands. So let's actually go over here. Okay. So your Memcache server is typically going to respond to three types of commands. First is storage commands. As I mentioned, things like set, add, replace, etc., which has to do with either storage or retrieval, or rather just storage. Then you have retrieval commands, which are all your gets, right? And then finally, you have other commands like stats, etc. So let's actually run some basic commands. So the first thing I'd like to run is version, so I can know the version. Let's typo in here, version. Just type in version, hit an enter. And if you notice, it says version is 156 Ubuntu. And if you recall, that's exactly what we found with Nmap. So we can't scroll up because we did a Control L. Okay, sorry for that little interruption. So when we hit version, we see the version. Now after that, if you want to look at some statistics, you can do a stats command, stats, and hit an enter. Oops. Just plain stat, my bad. Okay, all in lowercase. There we go. So if you notice, once we hit stats, we should be able to see all of this. Okay, I cannot remember where I left off. So we see that the version here, I apologize, the version here was 156, which is what we found in the Nmap scan. If you want to verify it for the running lab, you can always open up another terminal by just clicking on the lab link again. Okay, so both of these terminals are basically on the same Kali instance. So I could just quickly do an Nmap scan once again. So if you notice, the whole Memcache 156 is basically what the version is over here, right? Great. You can hit as many enters, but it basically may end up giving you just errors because it can't understand. And then, as I mentioned, in order to go ahead and look at the statistics, all you have to do is enter stats. And this gives you some statistics. Now let's scroll up. You'll actually see that all of this output, the PID, the uptime, the version, a bunch of other things, was exactly what we got when we had run the Nmap script as well, right? If you remember, the Nmap script gave us the same output. Oops, my bad, forgot the IP address. There you go, right? So the process ID, uptime, etc. All of this is actually being fetched from the stats over here. Okay, great. Let's go back to the slides. So we've seen stats, we've seen version. Quit, of course, is self-explanatory. We end up disconnecting from the server. Not really desirable. So let me reconnect to the server. I'm just going to type in version once again. Now, apart from that, I'm going to show you a very simple set and a get, which is setting a key value pair and getting a key value pair. So one key value pair, which is already in the Memcache server in this specific lab, is called flag. So to get that key value pair, all I have to do is get and then type in flag. And if you notice, this gives me an output which says value, and then after that for flag, and then this is the value, and then gives me an end just to show that the value output has actually ended. Now, if you wanted to set a value, you could basically do, let's say, set, and I'm going to say flag 2. Now, after that, you have to fill in a couple of arguments here, show you what each of them are. So when you want to do a set command, you have the command name, which is set, and then after that, the key, which is basically flag 1 is what we are putting over here. Sorry, flag 2 is what we put here. And after that, we need to put in the exp time or the expiry time. After how many seconds do we actually want this value to be removed automatically? Okay. And then the bytes, which is the size of the value. And then after that, we feed in the value. So if we go in here, so flags, we really don't care. I'm going to put 0. Amount of time this needs to be there, let's just say 30 seconds. And then after that, you hit an enter, or sorry, you give the number of bytes of the value. So I'm just going to give 4, hit an enter, and now feed in the value. So A, B, C, D, which is basically 4 bytes. And then once we hit an enter, you'll notice it says stored. Now, if you want to get the same value back, sorry, the error was because I hit an enter. I just have to do get flag 2. So if you notice, it gets me the value, basically tells me that the flag set was 0, the size in bytes is 4, and the value is ABCD, which is what is stored in there. Now, what you will interestingly see is that after 30 seconds, this value will automatically be flushed out by the Memcache server. And this is very, very interesting and important because a lot of times the application logic will actually set these parameters temporarily for some time and just rely on the Memcache server to flush it out, right? So Memcache is going to be a treasure trove of information from a pen testing perspective, but this is not persistent data. This data typically isn't retained when the server reboots. It just flushes everything. And even when the server is running, if the application has set a timeout for the key value pair, then it will be flushed out after the timer is over. So maybe 30 seconds are over. I'm going to look at flag 2 once again. If you notice, now when we do a get flag 2, we don't get anything, which is flag 2 has automatically been flushed, right? Great. So I hope you had fun in this video. The whole idea was to introduce you to the basics of a Memcache server, how to remotely run Nmap and do the basic fingerprinting, how to run the memcached info script which ships with Nmap to go ahead and find some basic info. In this video, we dealt with an open Memcache server which does not require authentication. And as I mentioned, many of them are around and such flaws were discovered. And after that, what we did was connect to the Memcache server, look at some basic commands like version, stats, the get, the set, and all of that. And also we understood that memory is here in an ephemeral basis, in a transient basis. It is not going to last forever. Applications themselves may set how soon the data needs to expire, or if the server restarts or something else happens, the data automatically is removed. The final thing I'd like to mention is Memcache servers do not provide reliability. So what that means is if you set in a value and say, hey, I would like flag to be there for the next 10 minutes, it might happen because of memory pressure or some other stuff. It may go ahead and expunge that value. So very important, this is only used in applications for caching, and this is not considered to be kind of a reliable cache per se, right? Fantastic. So hope you enjoyed this video. In the next video, we'll start digging in deeper into the Memcache server. Thank you.